It is Monday, December 9th, 2024. Just leaving CrossFit here. We got a good topic for today that was submitted. Sorry, my windows got all foggy from CrossFit. And we're going to be talking about burnout in software engineering. So let me back out of this spot. At least this car has a backup camera. That's nice. I'm still having flashbacks from that courtesy shuttle. And sorry if there's a little bit of noise. I got to clear up my windows here, because the entire car fogged up while I was waiting there. Okay, yeah, this was submitted from a viewer, so wanted to say thanks for that. Reminder that if you want me to talk through topics, just leave a comment. Lots of people have been doing that, which is great. It makes it super easy. Otherwise, if you want, feel free to DM me if you want to keep your request anonymous. Happy to kind of read through what you got to say. Leave more detail if you want me to provide more meaningful answers. When things are really generic, I unfortunately have to give very generic answers because I don't know what you want me to focus on. So just a reminder. So huge thanks for the requested topic here. I am a little bit out of breath, so I apologize if it sounds like I'm struggling to stay alive. But the question was like more specifically worded around like why burnout seems to be more prevalent in software engineers. And I didn't want to focus the time on like kind of putting software engineers or software engineering as a field sort of like at the pinnacle of burnout or something like that. I don't know if it's a huge I don't know, like benefit to try and spend time comparing, because I actually don't have stats to show even if that's a fact, right? Like, is software engineering statistically higher rate of burnout from other fields? I actually don't know, and I'd be very biased because I am and have been in a software engineering field like my entire professional career. So by definition, my view is going to be skewed, right? So I don't want to spend the time doing that because I actually just don't know. There could be other fields that are significantly more, or it looks different, right? So I figured I would just talk about burnout in software engineering and some things to think about there. So if you are sort of new to the field of software development, software engineering, I would say two things that I would urge everyone, especially juniors, to keep in mind as they're entering their career, and just keeping this in the back of your mind throughout your entire career, is that there is burnout and there is imposter syndrome. And these are two things that I feel like are constantly sort of out to get you, if I can phrase it that way. And sometimes they'll be very sneaky, like you won't notice they're happening. So even like burnout especially, right, can really sneak up on you, where it feels like seemingly out of nowhere, you're like, okay, like I've hit my limit and now I have to get out of this, this state. But the reality is like you were putting yourself there for a long time, right? So if I had to think about reasons why burnout is pretty big in software engineering, we'll start with one that I think is unfortunately probably common for many people. I've been pretty fortunate in my career to not have this consistently, I guess is how I would say it, but basically like bad management trying to say more out of software developers. So tight release schedule, constantly trying to just get more work out of software developers. And depending on how that looks in your work environment, that could just be like, hey, you got to stay late, or hey, we do agile and we have sprints, but like we're just going to keep adding more things into the sprint commitments. So this can obviously, like with those couple of examples, this can take shape in a lot of different ways, but the point is that like people are over their work capacity. And for this particular example, it's really like caused by management. Or when I say management, I don't just mean like your direct manager. It could be the way that your engineering and product organization is, like product gets to dictate what's going in, and you don't really have a choice and you're not being supported by your manager, like this kind of thing where it's just more and more and more. A note on this though is, like, if you've heard my other talks, I've always had this mindset. Well, I shouldn't say always. I've tried to embody this mindset throughout most of my management career, where basically, like, I try to put people first as much as possible. And one of the side effects of doing this is that when there are periods where, like, we do have like a really urgent release, or if we have a live service and there's like an ongoing issue, like a live site issue, that that people know that because I've spent the time building up the trust and the respect and not constantly demanding things of them, that when I do have a situation like that, that people know that like they have more trust in me, right? Nick doesn't always do this. That must mean it's serious. Nick's always been, I'm putting words into people's mouth. I don't actually know if I can truthfully say this, but this is what I'm trying to achieve, right? Nick has been flexible with, with our work hours and whatever else. So now that he's saying, hey, look, we have a critical issue, or we really have to push on this release or something, like, okay, like, I've been trying to keep the gas tank full in terms of engagement and stuff. So when I really need people to lean in and help, they are more willing to. Now, I don't know if I do a perfect job of this, but that is sort of the goal that I try to do. And I've heard, even just from people commenting, whether it's this channel, my primary channel, Dev Leader, whether it's on like LinkedIn or Twitter posts, I can confidently say, unfortunately, that there's seemingly many people with managers that are not trying to do that, and that means that I'm calling it like a gas tank of like motivation or engagement, right? Like, is constantly running on empty, and they're constantly trying to like put the metaphorical accelerator down to get more out of you, so then you inevitably experience burnout. So I think this is one way, and I don't know. I don't even know if I can confidently say, like, out of types of burnout or reasons, that like that's the biggest sort of culprit. I think maybe, but this is sort of the culprit that's like I said, it's imposed on you by your environment or your direct management. So that's one. And another one is kind of interesting, but it's almost like self-inflicted. And I haven't fully, like, in a lot of the things I'm talking about, I haven't fully thought through exactly how I want to say this one, but I'll just kind of like say the thoughts that are coming to mind. By the way, most of the time when I'm talking in the car, like, the thoughts are not fully formed, unless I have to yell at people for cutting me off and then cutting off someone else, like this idiot, which you can't see, but if you hear pop, 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 I'm downshifting to try and make sure that I'm not hitting people that are driving stupid. So it's kind of like a self-inflicted one, because it's like people, I feel like there's certain personality types that, like, especially in software development, it's like people that they're intelligent, they're trying hard, they're constantly trying to like push themselves. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, I think there's a personality, I don't know if you call that, like, I'm gonna mess this up, someone's gonna call me out on it. Is that like called type A personality? I don't know. And I don't even know if that's a good way to even categorize it, but I feel like there are at least pockets of people in software development that are they're focused on advancing their career, they're intelligent people, they're trying hard, they're always trying to do more and be more productive. Intelligence part aside, because I don't know if I can actually make a claim on that, but I think that, like, for myself personally, I fall into this kind of trap a little bit, which is like, I don't need someone to be like yelling at me to go do more work and put the pressure on. Like, I generally find that I am trying to do more things, and I'm sort of always operating at my limits. And so I think for this group of people, it's more of like can I call it lack of awareness? Lack of balance? And when I'm using the word lack here, I don't mean zero. I'm not saying like, therefore this person literally cannot balance anything or they have zero awareness. Not what I'm saying. But it's almost like it's not quite sufficient to help reach like a good equilibrium point. So what happens for these individuals, and I'm bucketing myself in here, so I'm trying to think about how I've approached like my career as a software developer, or even hobby projects when I'm trying to make things succeed. It's like, it's always, I don't know, like it's this feeling of, if I do more, like I can get it ahead, whether it's the product, the service, or even like my career, right? And what happens is like sense of pride in the work you're doing. Like I think there's a lot of good things that come out of this, but there's like consequences for not keeping it in check, right? So I feel like we get rewarded for putting in work, right? So, and not always. The people that experience burnout because they have management demanding things of them, this is a group of people that's not getting rewarded for putting in more work. Like you're keeping your job, and the reward is that you have to somehow work even harder next time. But this group of people that I'm describing now is like, we're the ones that are putting in the work, not being forced to, because we are almost like being rewarded for doing more work, right? Or it feels like it. So people that are trying to advance their career, they're putting in extra time, they're working harder, they're going above and beyond. So it's almost like calling it self-inflicting the potential for burnout. And I want to be careful how I say that too, because I even like the way that I see reward structure and stuff at Microsoft, right? Just as an example, it's about impact. So if you want to be able to advance in your career, you need to be demonstrating impact, right? So it's not, at some level, like I'm at principal level, I truly feel like to go from my level to the next level, it's not just let me keep doing my job at steady state. And I've actually, like I've heard this even like from senior to principal, and if I'm thinking through some examples of this, like people still had to kind of push outside of their comfort zone, but this happens more and more. So the point is that if you are this type of individual that's trying to advance their career, you kind of need to lean into like, how do I have more impact? And I'm saying like the phrase self-inflicted for it, but it's because the motivation to do so is apparently there. So say for example, in my role, right? So I'm at principal level. I know that I need to have impact, I need to have visibility. So if my steady state of work, which might already be very busy, is not giving me such opportunities, if I want to advance, I have to go find those opportunities and sort of like do more. And I already might be at capacity, but I have to do more. And I think like, if we think of people outside of just me, right? I think that this is a pretty common thing that comes up. And that can be kind of confusing sometimes, because you might have feedback from managers that isn't clear. And in terms of next step in your career, it might feel like the answer is supposed to be do more. To give you a brief example, I won't, it's obviously completely anonymous. I have worked with an individual at some point in the past that was under the impression that to advance in their role, the expectation was they needed to do more. And there were a handful of times where they would ask like about essentially like trying to talk about landing more work, like picking up more things to land more things. And I had to tell them on a couple of occasions, like, hey, like, by the way, like, you're already doing tons. It's not more work in your case. It's actually like consistency in the work, like high quality and consistency. But they already, again, like inherently had in their head, like, for me to do better, it must be more. Which is very interesting, I find. Like, I think that's common, though. It's a weird intersection. So I think that plays a huge role when it comes to burnout, is that we have people that are very motivated and unable to properly balance things for any number of reasons, right? If that could be external factors, that could be self-regulation, and you could even have a mix of these two, right? So I'm not trying to say they're mutually exclusive. I'm trying to say, like, examples of where this stems from. So let's take, for example, now these two scenarios where I said you have someone who's like self-motivated, who's like, I got to do more, I got to do better, I got to excel at my career. And then you put them into an environment where they don't have great management and or sort of like environment for like long-term productivity, if you will. And I think that can exacerbate the problem, like, tremendously, right? I think that's a huge part of it. If we shift gears a little bit to another example, I think especially over the past few years, work-life balance with remote work in particular. So I love remote work. Because you're watching Code Commute, you probably know that I commute to the office a few times per week, but like, that's technically by choice. Like, my manager likes it, and it's great that we have actually team members that do go into the office, so I like it too. Because if no one goes in, it's kind of silly to go drive in so I can call them from the office. But anyway, it's not forced, and I go. So I do hybrid. But remote work can be super tricky for some individuals. So I like it, but I think people have to have awareness of what's up. And when you have things like live services, you have remote work, where do you draw the line between, like, what's work and what's, like, your time? So I'll give you an example, even like this weekend, and I'm not blaming anyone, this is just a real example, right? So like yesterday, sorry, it's only Monday. Yesterday, I had to get on like a call for work because an area that I manage, someone had questions about something that was going on with some services. And so I was essentially on a call while not on an on-call shift on the weekend. And to reiterate, I'm not blaming anyone. Like, I was the right person to engage on that. But, like, so what does that mean? I just spent a few hours on the weekend working, right? Like, at this point in my career, for me to spend a couple of hours on the weekend working is absolutely nothing. I don't care. Because when I worked in a startup before, it was like, 12 plus hour days every day for years. And that was not because I was forced, right? That was self-inflicted. So for me to spend a couple hours on the weekend, I'm like, that's fine. But that's not necessarily an expectation that I have on other people. And there could be other situations where in reality, it's more time, more frequently for some individuals, right? So, like, what about their personal life? There are meetings that, especially because we are an international company, we're global, right? Like, we have team members in China, we have team members in Vietnam, we have team members in Europe. I don't really work with, it's pretty rare that I'm working with people in India. Plenty of people from India, even directly on my team, but not like not time zone related, right? So when we have these cross geo teams, like, I have to have, in order for me to keep sane, I have to have a lot of flexibility in my schedule. I'll give you an example. Even this week, I'm taking a Wednesday evening meeting, so just after work, moving that to today. And then Wednesday, instead of in the evening, I'm doing like an 8 a.m. meeting so that we can meet with people in Europe. So I have some days where I'm working later and some days where I'm working earlier. And like the reality is like time management becomes critical, or else you're spending so much more extra time working. Right? Think about days where it lines up where you have something in the morning at 8 and something at 6 for a meeting. Like, that's a long day. And if you have them recurring, like, you're just stacking up more time. So if people don't have this awareness, or they don't feel that they're in an environment that supports it, instead of that being like, oh, I just had to work an extra hour today or extra 2 hours on this given day, it's like consistently I am working extra hours many days. And I think, of course, that can lead to burnout, right? Because you're doing stuff that's just extra and you're not focusing on your life outside of work. I had something else just came to mind, and I was like, oh, pivot to that. And I'm watching these lights and this person driving through a red light. Amazing. You see a lot of really stupid stuff when you're driving. Oh, this is what I wanted to say, because I think this one's really critical too. Burnout does not just occur from people being like, oh man, this is the worst. I'm so close to home and this bus is like stopping. So I have to stop. Burnout doesn't just occur because you're doing something you hate, right? I think sometimes it's a lot more obvious you're experiencing burnout when you're like, I am constantly doing this thing and I don't like it and I'm disengaged. Like, you really notice the burnout effect, like compounding. But you can burn out from doing stuff you love too, okay? So that's something I want to close on, is that when I said earlier in this little monologue that it can sneak up on you, like, consider that you might really enjoy doing something, and the side effect is that you put more and more time into it. The reality is, like, things often come back to balance, and if you're not balancing things in particular ways, something else will give. So this is a scenario where if you're not paying attention to it, burnout can sneak up on you. It's just that it might look different. So I've personally experienced this, where I've talked about this in the past. When I was working at a startup, it was a few years in, and I realized that, like, just from working all the time, I developed like pretty bad social anxiety. I went from being pretty outgoing, like, I'm introverted, but like to go hang out with friends and stuff, like, or at least if someone was like, let's go to a party, I would be like, that actually sounds fun. Like, I would like to go, have fun somewhere, and or like go out, like, for, whether it was like to a bar or something, like to just be able to go do stuff. Even though I'm introverted, it would be nice to go, do something. And I reached a point where I had so much social anxiety that even to go hang out with friends, if it were like at a friend's place that I didn't know as well, or there was like their friends that I didn't know, like, I wouldn't want to go. And I was like, why did this happen, right? I was starting to make excuses for doing social things, and it's because I had bad social anxiety. So these types of things can sneak up on you, and it's not obvious. So I think my sort of takeaway point for everyone is that, like, having awareness of burnout, I think, is critical. It's not just for software engineers, but we talk about it a lot in software engineering because it is really important to think about. And I think ultimately it comes down to balance. And because when we describe it as balance, you can have things that that affect that balance, whether that's you, your environment, the scenario that you're in. They will pull in different directions on that balance. And I think that when you have awareness of these types of things, then you can work towards making that balance, closer to that center point. Otherwise, you start pulling in some directions, and even if it feels like, for example, oh, look, I'm being rewarded for my career progression. Like, this feels like the good direction to move in. For how long, right? For how long can you be pushing outside of that center point of balance, chasing that? For how long can a manager or product owner, whatever, expect that their team is like working around the clock, getting more and more stuff done? We have to try and get back to that equilibrium point. And I think personally, as a manager, when I'm thinking about teams and productivity, my head goes to, this is kind of a weird way without drawing a picture of it, but like, how can I think about this equilibrium point for a team? And how can I find ways to make a team more productive while keeping them at that equilibrium point, right? As little as possible moving away from that center of equilibrium. So something to think about. Software engineering and burnout, unfortunately, go hand in hand a lot of the time. So do have awareness of that. And I would say, sorry, this guy's walking his dog past me and staring at me. It's probably kind of weird that I'm sitting in my car filming myself. Yeah, if you have any other thoughts on burnout, you can feel free to share stuff below. It's important to talk about. So thanks for submitting this one. If you have your own questions you want answered, submit them below, and happy to chat through them. I will see you soon. Take care.